In a quiet town outside Kyoto, the sound of a piano often floated through the open window of a small wooden house. The sound was not loud or showy. It was soft, steady, and filled with feeling. Inside, a 17-year-old girl named Rina Takahashi sat at an old upright piano that had been in her family for years. The keys were slightly yellowed, and some notes made a faint clicking sound, but to Rina, it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. Every evening after school, Rina would walk home quickly, put down her school bag, and sit at the piano. Sometimes she played for hours, forgetting the time until her mother called her for dinner. She didn't play because anyone told her to. She played because she couldn't help it. The piano was where she felt most alive. Her classmates often talked about trendy bands, pop singers, or the latest apps, but Rina didn't follow those things. She loved classical music, especially Chopin. When she listened to Chopin, she felt like she was reading someone's diary, filled with secret hopes, fears, and dreams. His music spoke to her in ways that words never could. Rina's family lived simply. Her parents owned a small stationery shop near the train station. They worked long hours, selling notebooks, pens, and art supplies to students and office workers. They didn't have much money, but they tried to give Rina everything they could. The piano had belonged to her grandmother, who once dreamed of becoming a pianist herself before the war changed everything. When her grandmother passed away, the piano became Rina's treasure. Every time she played it, she felt close to her. Her mother, Keiko, often watched her from the kitchen doorway. Sometimes she would smile quietly to herself, seeing the way Rina's fingers moved with such care, as if she were speaking through the notes. "You play like you're telling a story," her mother would say. And Rina would smile back, though she didn't always understand what story she was telling, only that it came from her heart. Her father, Hiroshi, was proud too, though he didn't always show it. He worried about Rina's future. Music was beautiful, but it wasn't easy to make a living from it. He often said, "You should have something stable to fall back on." Rina. She would nod politely, even though she knew deep down that she didn't want anything else. Rina had a music teacher, Mrs. Watanabe, who taught piano lessons at a small studio near the school. She was in her 60s, kind but strict. She had once studied in Europe and loved to tell stories about the great pianists she had met. She noticed something special in Rina from the beginning. "You have a rare gift," she said once after hearing Rina play Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. "You don't just play the notes, you feel them." But not everything came easily. Rina was shy and easily discouraged. When she compared herself to other students who had better instruments, professional teachers, or more expensive lessons, she sometimes felt small. At local competitions, she would sit backstage listening to others perform and think, "They're so much better than me." Her hands would tremble before it was her turn. At one competition, she made a small mistake near the end of her piece. It was barely noticeable, but to Rina it felt like failure. She bowed and left the stage quickly, hiding in the hallway until her teacher found her. "Perfection isn't the goal," Mrs. Watanabe said softly. "Music is about honesty. You played with honesty." Rina didn't reply, but she never forgot those words. School life for Rina was quiet. She wasn't unpopular, but she didn't talk much. She liked sitting near the window, sketching notes in her music book during breaks. Her classmates often saw her carrying sheet music instead of magazines or novels. Some teased her gently about being an old soul, but she didn't mind. She had a few close friends who admired her dedication, though none of them really understood the deep connection she felt with music. On weekends, while others went to cafes or karaoke, Rina stayed home to practice. Sometimes her mother would worry she was overdoing it. "Go out and get some fresh air," she'd say. But Rina found her freedom at the piano, not outside. When she played, she felt like she could breathe. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Rina would sometimes sneak back to the piano. She would open the lid slowly so it wouldn't creak and press the keys as softly as possible. The sound was gentle, almost like a whisper in the dark. In those quiet moments, she dreamed of what it might feel like to play on a real concert stage one day. A big, shiny grand piano under bright lights with people listening not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Still, she kept that dream mostly to herself. It felt too far away, too impossible. Japan had many talented pianists, and the world was full of even more. What chance did a girl from a small town have? One spring afternoon, as the cherry blossoms were falling, Rena's teacher announced that their small studio would hold a recital at the local community center. Each student would perform one piece. Mrs. Watanabe asked Rena what she wanted to play. Rena thought for a moment and said quietly, "Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major." The teacher raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold choice," she said. The Polonaise, often called the heroic Polonaise, was one of Chopin's most famous and powerful works. It demanded strength, confidence, and deep understanding. It was not a piece most 17-year-olds could pull off easily. "I know," Rena said softly, "but I want to try." From that day, her practice took on new meaning. Every day after school, she focused on the Polonaise. She studied old recordings by great pianists, listened to how they phrased each note, and read about Chopin's life. The more she learned, the more she felt connected to the music. She didn't just want to play it correctly, she wanted to understand it. Sometimes her fingers ached. Sometimes she got frustrated and hit the keys too hard, scolding herself after. "Why can't I get it right?" she would whisper. But each time she felt like giving up, she remembered her grandmother's old words. Play not to impress, but to express. As the recital day approached, Rena practiced even harder. The house was filled with the sounds of the Polonaise, its proud rhythms, its stormy chords, its moments of calm beauty. Her parents listened from the kitchen, sometimes stopping their work just to hear her play. One evening, her father quietly recorded her on his phone without telling her. Later, he showed the video to a friend who worked at the local high school's music club. "Your daughter's amazing," the friend said. People should hear her, but Rena didn't think she was amazing. She still noticed every small mistake, every uneven rhythm. The night before the recital, she barely slept. She kept replaying the piece in her head, imagining every note, every pause. The next afternoon, the community hall was full. Parents, students, and neighbors filled the seats. Rena wore a simple white dress and sat quietly backstage, clutching her sheet music. She could hear the applause for each performer, and her heart beat faster with every clap. When her name was called, her legs felt heavy, but she took a deep breath and walked to the piano. The stage lights were bright, and for a moment she couldn't see the audience. She bowed, sat down, and placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes were shaky, but soon she forgot about the crowd. The music took over. The Polonaise was powerful, almost like a conversation between courage and doubt. As she played, she felt something rise inside her, something fierce and free. When she struck the final chord, the hall was silent for a second, then filled with applause. She stood and bowed, cheeks flushed, hands trembling. For the first time, she felt what it meant to move people with her music. After the recital, her teacher hugged her. "You did it," she said. "You made Chopin proud." That night at home, her parents surprised her with a small cake. On top, it said, "Congratulations, Rena." She laughed shyly, feeling both happy and embarrassed. Her father showed her the video he had taken, and they all watched it together. The next morning, her teacher uploaded that same video to a small music sharing site. She didn't tell Rena about it. She just wanted to show others how much heart her student had. Neither of them knew that this simple act would soon change everything. For now, Rena was just happy to have played her heart out. She didn't think about fame, competitions, or big dreams. She was just a girl in a small town, sitting by her old piano, playing Chopin under the soft light of the morning sun. The sound of her music drifted once more through the open window, across the quiet streets, into the hearts of anyone who happened to pass by. And though she didn't know it yet, that same sound would soon travel far beyond her little town, across oceans and countries, to reach people she had never met, in ways she could never have imagined. The morning after the recital, the sun rose softly over Kyoto. Rena woke up later than usual, feeling calm and light. The big performance was finally over, and she felt both proud and relieved. She didn't know that somewhere far beyond her little town, people were already watching her play the Polonaise. Her teacher, Mrs. Watanabe, had uploaded the video the night before. She thought maybe a few of her friends or students might enjoy it. But the internet had its own way of spreading things. By the next afternoon, the video began to be shared by people who didn't even know Rena's name. They just saw a young girl playing Chopin with passion and grace and felt moved by it. At first, Rena didn't know anything about it. She spent the morning helping her mother at the shop, arranging boxes of pens and notebooks. A few classmates who had gone to the recital stopped by and complimented her. One of them said, "Hey, your video's online." "It's amazing." Rena blinked, confused. "Video?" she asked. The girl smiled. "Your teacher posted it. Everyone's talking about it." When Rena got home that evening, she turned on her old laptop. Her hands trembled as she searched for the video. And there it was. The title read, "17-year-old girl plays Chopin's Polonaise with incredible emotion." The thumbnail showed her sitting at the piano in her white dress. She clicked play and the familiar sound filled the room. She couldn't believe it. The video had already gathered thousands of views and hundreds of comments in just a single day. People from different countries had written messages like, "This performance gave me goosebumps," and "So much soul in such a young pianist." Rena's eyes widened as she scrolled through the comments. She didn't even know how to react. "Why are so many people watching me?" she whispered to herself. Her mother walked in, drying her hands on a towel. "What is it?" she asked. Rena turned the screen toward her. "Look," she said, still in disbelief. Her mother's jaw dropped when she saw the numbers. "Oh my goodness," she murmured. By the end of the week, the video had been shared on several music blogs and even featured in a local newspaper article. A headline read, "Young Japanese pianist captures the internet's heart with Chopin." Strangers began sending messages asking if Rena had a YouTube channel or if she was planning to perform again. Soon, Rena's life started changing faster than she could understand. At school, students who had barely spoken to her before now greeted her with excitement. "You're famous," one boy shouted in the hallway. She blushed and shook her head. No, I'm not." But secretly, she couldn't stop thinking about how something she played in a small hall could reach people across the world. Her teacher, Mrs. Watanabe, was both proud and cautious. She called Rena to her studio a few days later. "Rena," she said gently, "this attention is wonderful, but remember, fame comes and goes. What matters is your music." Rena nodded, trying to take the words to heart. Still, she couldn't deny the spark of hope that had been lit inside her. Maybe, just maybe, this could lead somewhere. A week later, an email arrived in her inbox. It came from the Chopin International Piano Competition for young musicians in Warsaw, Poland. Rena almost thought it was a scam at first. But when Mrs. Watanabe confirmed it was real, she felt her heart stop for a moment. The message invited her to audition for the next competition cycle, one of the most prestigious events for young pianists in the world. She read the email again and again. Warsaw, Poland, the land of Chopin. It felt unreal, like a dream she was too afraid to believe in. "I can't go to Poland," she whispered. Her parents looked at her with mixed emotions. Her mother's eyes were full of pride, but her father's face showed worry. "That's a long way from home," he said. "It will be expensive. The flight, the stay, everything." "I know," Rena said quietly. She didn't want to burden them. But inside, her heart was burning with a mixture of fear and longing. She couldn't stop imagining herself playing Chopin's music in the very country he was born in. Over the next few days, her teacher helped her prepare for the possibility. "If you want to go, you'll need to submit a video audition," Mrs. Watanabe said. "You'll need to show not only skill but also spirit." Rena nodded and began practicing harder than ever before. Her days became a blur of school, homework, and endless practice. She worked on Chopin's Ballad No. 1, one of the most difficult pieces he ever wrote. Her old piano sometimes sounded too soft for its power, but she imagined the sound of a grand piano and adjusted her touch. Her father would come home late from the shop and find her still playing. "It's late," he would say softly. "Go to sleep." But when he looked closer, he saw the determination in her eyes and couldn't bring himself to stop her. One evening, as Rena was recording her audition video, her mother brought her a cup of tea. "You remind me of your grandmother," she said, smiling. "She used to play for hours, too." Rena smiled back. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" Her mother nodded. "She already is." A few weeks later, the audition video was sent off. All they could do now was wait. Rena tried to distract herself by studying and helping at the shop, but her mind kept drifting to Warsaw. Sometimes late at night, she'd lie in bed imagining what it would be like to walk into a foreign concert hall, filled with people she didn't know, to play Chopin's music in his homeland. Then one morning, an email arrived with the subject line, "Congratulations, you have been selected." Rena froze. Her mother came rushing in when she heard her scream. "What happened?" she asked, startled. Rena turned the screen toward her, tears forming in her eyes. "I got in," she whispered. "I got in." The whole family celebrated that night. But beneath the happiness there was a new worry: money. The trip would cost more than they could easily afford. Flights, hotel registration, food, it added up quickly. Her father sat at the small kitchen table, going over numbers on a notepad. "Even if we save everything this month, it won't be enough," he said quietly. Her mother touched his hand. "We'll find a way," she said. "She's worked so hard for this." Word spread around town, and soon neighbors and friends began offering help. A local community group decided to organize a small fundraising concert at the school gym. Rena was hesitant at first. She didn't like asking for help. But when she saw how many people came to support her, she felt deeply moved. On the night of the fundraiser, the gym was filled with folding chairs, warm lights, and familiar faces. When Rena stepped up to the piano, she saw her classmates, teachers, and even strangers who had watched her online. "Thank you," she said softly before beginning to play. Her fingers moved gently across the keys, and the music filled the room. It wasn't about competition this time, it was about gratitude. By the end of the evening, they had raised enough for her travel. As she bowed to the crowd, she saw her father standing near the back, wiping his eyes quietly. A month later, she stood at the airport, suitcase in hand, heart pounding. Her parents hugged her tightly. "We'll be waiting for your call," her mother said. Her father squeezed her shoulder. "Play with your heart, Rena. That's all that matters." When the plane took off, Rena looked out the window at the shrinking view of Japan. The clouds looked like soft waves. She whispered to herself, "I'm really going." Warsaw was colder than she expected. The air smelled of winter and history. The streets were lined with old buildings, their windows glowing with warm yellow lights. When she walked through the city, she saw posters and signs for the competition. It all felt unreal, like stepping into another world. At the hotel, she met other young pianists from different countries. Some spoke English, some didn't, but all of them carried the same quiet fire in their eyes. They talked about their favorite composers, their teachers, their dreams. Rena listened more than she spoke, feeling shy but also inspired. The rehearsal room was filled with the sound of pianos, scales, arpeggios, fragments of Chopin. Everyone seemed so confident. Rena felt small again, like she didn't belong. Her hands trembled as she waited for her turn to practice on the grand piano. When she finally sat down, the instrument felt huge beneath her fingers. The keys were heavier, the sound richer, deeper. She played a few notes and then stopped, her heart racing. "What am I doing here?" she thought. "They're all better than me." That night in her hotel room, she sat by the window looking out at the city lights. She felt the weight of expectation pressing on her chest. For a moment, she wished she could be back home in her small room with her old piano. Tears welled in her eyes, but then she remembered her grandmother's words. "Play not to impress, but to express." She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I'll do my best. For myself, for my family, and for her." Outside, snow began to fall slowly, covering the streets of Warsaw in white. Tomorrow, the competition would begin. And for Rena Takahashi, the girl from a small town in Japan, it was the start of something she had never dared to dream possible. The first morning of the competition came with a gray sky and a cold wind that swept through the city. Rena stood by her hotel window holding a warm cup of tea, trying to calm her heart. She could see the top of the concert hall in the distance, tall and elegant against the cloudy horizon. Her suitcase was open on the bed, filled with music scores, her concert dress, and a small photo of her family. When she arrived at the hall later that morning, she saw young pianists from all over the world, some wearing formal clothes, others chatting confidently in English or Polish. They carried folders of music and moved with an ease that made Rena feel like she had stepped into another universe. Everyone seemed older, taller, more prepared. She quietly took her place in the waiting area and tried not to look nervous. Her hands were cold, so she rubbed them together. She could hear the faint sound of a piano coming from inside the hall where someone was rehearsing. The music was fast and precise, every note like a spark. Rena's heart beat faster. She knew the piece. It was Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody, and whoever was playing it sounded like a professional. When it was finally her turn to rehearse, She walked to the stage slowly, trying to breathe evenly. The grand piano stood under the soft light like something alive, strong and silent. She sat down and pressed a few keys gently. The sound that came out was deep and warm, much richer than the piano back home. For a moment she forgot her fear and let herself sink into the sound. She started to play the opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, her audition piece. But halfway through, her fingers slipped slightly. She stopped and felt a wave of embarrassment rush over her. She quickly took a deep breath and began again, forcing herself to focus. When she finished, her teacher's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't fight the piano. Listen to it." She closed her eyes, pressed one more chord, and smiled faintly. As she stood up, one of the competition assistants smiled kindly at her. "Beautiful tone," he said in accented English. Rina bowed slightly and whispered, "Thank you." It was a small moment, but it gave her courage. The next few days passed in a blur of rehearsals, practice sessions, and anxious waiting. The competitors stayed in the same hotel, so Rina often heard the sound of pianos coming from other rooms. Late at night, she would listen through the thin walls and think, "They're still practicing too." It reminded her that everyone, no matter how confident they looked, was struggling in their own way. She called her parents every night. Her mother always asked if she was eating well, and her father would ask about her practice. "We're proud of you no matter what happens," he said one evening. Those words became a quiet shield against her fear. The day before the competition, all the participants gathered for a short meeting in the hall. The director of the event gave a speech about Chopin, music, and youth. Rina listened carefully, her heart pounding. When the director said, "Music is not a race, it's a conversation with the soul," she felt as if the words were meant just for her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the hotel window again, looking at the lights outside. Snowflakes drifted slowly down, catching the light from street lamps. She thought about her grandmother, about the old piano back home, and about all the hours she had spent alone practicing. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I just need to play with my heart." The next morning she woke up early, dressed carefully, and tied her hair neatly. Her concert dress was simple and elegant, pale blue with a ribbon at the waist. She carried her music folder even though she knew every note by memory. Her steps echoed softly in the hallway as she walked toward the performance room. The hall was large, filled with rows of seats and a grand piano shining under the lights. When she stepped onto the stage, everything went quiet. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Her hands trembled slightly, but she remembered what her teacher used to say. "The audience is not your enemy. They're your friends who came to listen." She sat down, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes floated into the air, soft and delicate. Slowly, the tension in her shoulders began to melt away. The music grew, flowing like a river. Every note seemed to speak, carrying her feelings across the hall. In that moment, Rina forgot about the judges, the crowd, and the competition. She was back home in her small room with the old piano, playing for her grandmother. Her expression softened. Her touch became lighter, and the melody filled with warmth and power. When the final chord rang out, there was silence for a heartbeat, and then applause broke out. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was genuine. She stood, bowed deeply, and smiled. Backstage, she felt light as air. Other contestants congratulated her, and one girl from Italy said, "You play with such heart." Rina thanked her shyly. It was the best compliment she could ever receive. Later that evening, the list of finalists was posted on a large board near the entrance. Rina walked over slowly, her heart pounding in her ears. She scanned the names carefully, and there it was. Her name. Rina Takahashi, Japan. For a moment, she just stared at it, hardly believing it. Then she covered her mouth with her hands as tears welled in her eyes. She didn't notice Mrs. Watanabe standing nearby until she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did it," her teacher said softly. That night, Rina called home. "I made it to the finals," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. On the other end, her mother gasped, and she could hear her father shouting in the background. "I knew it! I knew she could do it." Rina laughed through her tears. "It's not over yet," she said. "The final round is in 2 days." The next 2 days were the hardest she had ever experienced. She practiced every morning and rested in the afternoon. She didn't want to tire her fingers. Every time she sat at the piano, she reminded herself why she started playing in the first place. It wasn't for trophies or fame, it was because music made her feel alive. On the day of the final, she woke up before dawn. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "No matter what happens, I'll play honestly." The hall was filled with an even bigger audience than before. Reporters, photographers, music professors, they were all there. The finalists drew lots for the order of performance. Rina drew number 4. As she waited backstage, she listened to the first 3 performers. They were incredible, strong, confident, flawless. For a moment, her old fear came back. Her hands grew cold and her breathing quickened. Then she remembered something her grandmother once said. Music is not about showing how good you are. It's about showing who you are. When her turn came, she walked to the piano calmly. She bowed to the judges and audience, then sat down. Her heart was racing, but she placed her hands on the keys and began to play Chopin's Polonaise, the same piece that had first captured everyone's attention back home. From the first chord, something changed in the room. The music was bold, proud, and full of emotion. Rina's fingers moved with power she didn't know she had. Every note seemed to echo her journey. The long nights, the struggles, the hopes, the love she carried for her family. Halfway through, she felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't stop. The music became her voice. The final section thundered through the hall like a storm, then ended with a brilliant ringing chord that hung in the air. The audience was silent for a long moment. Then, as if waking from a dream, they rose to their feet. The sound of applause filled the hall, echoing off the walls. Rina stood and bowed, her hands trembling, her heart overflowing. She didn't know whether she had won or not, but in that instant she didn't care. Backstage, she was surrounded by people congratulating her. Some judges nodded approvingly. One of them even said, "You reminded us why Chopin wrote music, for feeling." Later that night, in her hotel room, Rina sat quietly with a cup of tea. Snow was falling again outside and the city glowed softly. She thought about everything that had happened, from the small recital in Japan to this grand stage in Poland. She felt grateful, humbled, and peaceful. She didn't know the results yet, but she realized something important. Winning wasn't the real dream. The real dream was this moment, the chance to share her heart with others, to speak through music and be heard. When she finally lay down to sleep, she whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you, Grandma. Thank you for the piano, for everything." Then she closed her eyes, the echo of the Polonaise still playing gently in her mind, as the snow continued to fall over Warsaw. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hotel window, touching the edge of Rina's bed. She woke slowly, still half dreaming of the music from the night before. For a few seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw her suitcase, her concert dress hanging on the chair, and it all came back. The finals, the applause, the standing ovation. Her body felt heavy from exhaustion, but her heart was light. She had done it. She had played with everything inside her. She didn't know the results yet, but for once that didn't matter. She had felt something pure on that stage, something she would remember for the rest of her life. When she went down to breakfast, the other contestants were already sitting at the tables. Some smiled politely, some looked nervous. Everyone was waiting for the announcement that would come later that afternoon. Rina took a seat by the window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. Outside, snow was melting on the streets of Warsaw, leaving tiny streams that glistened in the sunlight. Her teacher, Mrs. Watanabe, joined her a few minutes later. "You look calm," she said gently. Rina smiled. "I'm trying to be," Mrs. Watanabe nodded. "Whatever happens, remember, you've already achieved something most can only dream of." They talked quietly for a while about the performance, about how Rina's playing had touched the audience. "Do you think I played well enough?" Rina asked softly. Her teacher looked at her, eyes warm. "You played honestly. That is enough." The announcement ceremony was held in the same hall where they had all performed. The stage looked different now, less intimidating, more familiar. The competitors sat in rows, waiting as the judges took their places. Rina's palms were damp and her heart began to race again. The head judge stepped forward, holding a microphone. He began by thanking all the participants, praising their dedication and courage. Then, one by one, he started to announce the winners. As he read through the names, Rina listened carefully, her stomach twisting with every word. When the first prize was announced, the hall erupted in applause. It went to a boy from Russia who had played Liszt. The second prize went to a girl from France. The third to a pianist from South Korea. Rena clapped for each of them, smiling even though her heart was sinking a little. Her name hadn't been called. She told herself it was fine. She had expected this. But still there was a small ache inside her chest. Then, as the hall began to quiet, the head judge continued, and this year, the special jury award for artistic integrity and emotional expression goes to... He paused for a second. Rina Takahashi from Japan. For a moment, Rina couldn't move. The words hung in the air like music. She blinked, thinking she had misheard. But when the audience began to clap and her teacher touched her arm, whispering, "That's you," she finally stood up. As she walked to the stage, everything felt unreal. The lights were bright, the clapping endless. The head judge shook her hand and said, "You reminded us why Chopin's music lives on." His voice was kind, sincere. Rina bowed deeply, her eyes filling with tears. When she stepped down, the applause still echoed in her ears. Mrs. Watanabe hugged her tightly. "I told you," she whispered. "You played with your heart." That night, Rina couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, looking at the small silver plaque she had received. It wasn't the top prize, but to her it felt even more meaningful. It said something about honesty, about soul. She thought of her grandmother again, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "You'd be happy, wouldn't you?" she whispered. The next day, the competition hall was empty. The banners were coming down, the lights dimmed. Rina and her teacher packed their things quietly. Before leaving, Rina walked to the stage one last time. She touched the piano lid gently and said under her breath, "Thank you." On the flight back to Japan, she sat by the window, staring at the endless clouds. The whole trip felt like a dream she had somehow lived. She took out her notebook and began to write. About the competition, about the people she met, about the snow in Warsaw. She didn't want to forget a single moment. When she landed back home, her parents were waiting at the airport with flowers in their hands. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said. Her father smiled proudly. "Welcome home, our little pianist." Rina laughed, her heart swelling with warmth. "I missed you both so much," she said. They drove home through the familiar streets of their small town. Everything looked the same. The little stationery shop, the narrow roads, the soft glow of the evening lights. Yet to Rina it all felt new. She had seen another world, and now she was bringing a piece of it back with her. When they arrived home, Rina went straight to the old piano. She sat down and pressed a few keys. The sound was smaller than the grand piano in Warsaw, but it was still beautiful, gentle, honest, and familiar. Her father sat nearby, listening. "You sound different," he said. "Better," Rina smiled. "Maybe I just understand the music better now." Word spread quickly through town about her award. The local paper wrote another story about her, calling her the young pianist who brought honor to her hometown. Neighbors dropped by the shop to congratulate her parents. Children from nearby schools came to see her perform at small events. At first, Rina felt shy about all the attention. She didn't see herself as someone special. She was just the same girl who loved playing Chopin on her grandmother's piano. But when she saw how inspired the younger students, or how their eyes shone when they listened, she realized that her story could mean something to others. She started visiting schools to give small recitals and talks. She told students about her experience, about how she once doubted herself too. "You don't need to be perfect," she would say. "You just need to play or create from your heart." One afternoon, she was invited to perform at a large hall in Tokyo. It wasn't an international competition, just a special concert featuring young talents from across Japan. Still, it felt like a big step. Standing on that stage, she remembered her journey. The viral video, the long nights of practice, the snow in Warsaw, the applause. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The notes flowed effortlessly, clear and full of emotion. The audience listened in complete silence. When she finished, they clapped warmly. After the concert, a reporter approached her. "What do you want to do next?" he asked. Rina thought for a moment. "I want to keep learning," she said. "And I want to share music with people who think they can't reach their dreams. Because I was one of them." As time passed, Rina received letters and emails from people around the world who had seen her performance online. Some were from young musicians who said her story gave them courage. Others were from older people who said her music reminded them of something they had forgotten, the simple beauty of feeling. Rena always wrote back when she could. She never wanted to forget the connection that music created between hearts. She knew now that fame or prizes were not the real reward. The real reward was when someone listened and felt something true. Months later, she received another invitation, this time to perform with an orchestra in Europe. It was not a competition, but a concert celebrating young artists who had shown extraordinary sincerity in performance. She accepted with a smile. She would return to Europe, not as a contestant, but as a performer. The night before she left again, she sat at her piano one last time. Her parents were already asleep. She played softly, almost like a lullaby. When she reached the final note, she let her hands rest on the keys. She looked around her small room, the faded wallpaper, the photo of her grandmother, the piano stool worn from years of practice, and whispered, "I'll keep playing for you, for everyone who believed in me." Outside, the moonlight spilled through the window, touching the piano gently. It was quiet, peaceful, and full of promise. When she boarded the plane the next day, Rena didn't feel nervous this time. She knew who she was now. Not just a pianist, but a storyteller who used sound instead of words. As the plane rose into the clouds, she smiled to herself, remembering the first time she ever played Chopin on her grandmother's piano. It had started as a dream she never dared to say aloud. Now it was her life, a path shaped by music, courage, and heart, and somewhere far below, in the little town she called home, her parents stood outside the shop watching the sky, proud and grateful for the girl whose music had reached the world. Rena stepped off the plane and took a deep breath of fresh air. She had returned to Japan many times since the competition, performing in concerts and visiting schools. But this time felt different. She wasn't just a young girl who had once played Chopin. She was a young pianist who had begun to find her own voice. Her travels, performances, and the connections she had made along the way had shaped her in ways she had never imagined. Her parents were waiting at the airport, smiling warmly. Her mother hugged her tightly and her father ruffled her hair. "It feels like you've grown a little taller while you were away," he said, chuckling. Rena laughed, feeling the comfort of home after months of constant travel. Back in her small town, life seemed quieter, slower, and yet richer. The streets, the shops, and the school looked the same, but everything carried a new weight of meaning for her. She would walk past her old piano in the corner of her room, gently brushing her hands over the keys, remembering the journey that had begun there years ago. Rena began teaching small piano lessons in her home. She wanted to share what she had learned, not just about technique or reading music, but about the feelings behind the notes. Her students ranged from little children barely old enough to reach the keys to teenagers with dreams similar to hers. She encouraged them to find their own voices, just as she had. When one young student asked, "How do I make people feel what I feel?" Rena smiled softly. "You don't have to make them feel exactly what you feel," she said. "You just need to be honest with yourself. Music is honest when it comes from here," she added, tapping her chest gently. Meanwhile, invitations for performances continued to arrive from around the world. Orchestras, concert halls, and even music festivals requested her presence. Some offered large stages and thousands of listeners, while others were intimate gatherings in small towns. Rena accepted each opportunity with care, choosing those where she felt she could truly express herself rather than just perform for fame. One day she was invited to perform in Europe again. This time it was a special concert dedicated to young pianists who had shown extraordinary emotional depth. The concert hall was massive, with seats that stretched far back, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and the stage lit with a soft golden glow. Rena took her place at the grand piano, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves, but she didn't let fear control her. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered all the quiet nights at home, all the hours spent with her grandmother's piano, all the small recitals and competitions. Every moment had led to this one. Her fingers touched the keys and the first notes rang out clear and powerful. She played Chopin's Polonaise once again, but this time it felt different. The music carried the weight of her experiences, the joy and struggle of her journey, and the love she felt for everyone who had supported her. The audience listened in silence, moved by the honesty and beauty of her performance. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Some people stood, some wiped tears from their eyes. She bowed deeply, smiling through tears of her own. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about connection. Her music had touched hearts once more, far from the small room where it all began. Back home, Rena continued to balance school, practice, and teaching. She still spent long evenings at her grandmother's piano, exploring new pieces and refining her technique. She also began composing small pieces of her own, experimenting with melodies that expressed her thoughts and feelings. Though she was only 17, her music carried the depth of someone who had already lived through challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Her story began to inspire others in unexpected ways. Letters arrived from young musicians in different cities and countries, sharing how her journey had encouraged them to follow their own dreams. Some wrote that they had never believed in themselves until they saw her perform. Others shared that they had stopped playing music, but her story reminded them why they had started. Rena read each letter carefully. She responded when she could, offering encouragement, advice, and sometimes just a simple word of support. She realized that music was more than performance. It was a bridge between people, a way to reach beyond words. As the months went by, Rena's reputation grew. She received invitations to record, to participate in cultural events, and to collaborate with other musicians. Yet she remained grounded. She never let fame distract her from why she played. For her, the true reward was the feeling of music flowing through her hands and reaching someone else's heart. One afternoon, while practicing at home, she paused and looked at the old piano. She remembered the small recital in her hometown that had first caught people's attention online. She remembered the airport goodbyes, the nervous first rehearsal in Warsaw, the applause, the awards, the snow, the cold, the hotel rooms, the long flights, and every small step of the journey. She realized how far she had come. Her parents watched quietly from the doorway. Her mother smiled.
"You've grown so much, Rena," she said softly.
"Not just as a pianist, but as a person." Her father nodded. "You've learned to follow your heart. That's the greatest lesson anyone can teach you." Rena smiled, feeling the truth in their words. She thought about the young students she taught, the people she had moved with her music, and the countless hours of practice and patience it had taken. Every struggle, every tear, every small triumph had built her into the musician and the person she was now. Even though she had achieved so much, Rena knew her journey was far from over. She dreamed of composing larger works, performing in more countries, and sharing her story with even more people. But she also knew that the essence of her music would never change. It would always come from the heart, simple, honest, and full of feeling. Her story became a quiet legend in her town. People spoke of the girl who had started on an old piano, whose music had crossed oceans and inspired thousands. Yet Rena remained humble. She never forgot her roots, her family, or the small joys of practicing alone in her room. One evening, she sat by her piano, playing softly as the sun set outside. The room glowed with the warm light of the evening, and the music seemed to fill every corner of the house. She thought about her grandmother, imagining her smiling somewhere nearby. "I'll keep playing," she whispered. "For you, for me, for everyone who believes in dreams." Rena's journey showed her that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, honesty, courage, and the willingness to keep going even when it seemed impossible were what truly mattered. She realized that music was not just notes on a page, it was life, emotion, and connection. As she grew older, she continued performing, teaching, and composing. She never sought fame for its own sake. Instead, she focused on touching hearts, inspiring others, and remaining true to the love she had discovered for music as a child. Her hometown remained her anchor, the old piano her constant companion, and her family her source of strength. Yet her music had no borders. From small rooms to large concert halls, from local audiences to international listeners, Rena's melodies carried a message of hope, courage, and authenticity. And in the hearts of everyone who heard her, Rena's music lived on, proof that even a single girl with determination and heart could make a difference in the world. Through her journey, Rena understood something that she would carry forever. Success was not measured in awards or applause, but in the moments when a listener paused, felt, and remembered why music mattered. And she promised herself that she would keep creating those moments for the rest of her life. Even as she looked toward new stages, new countries, and new challenges, Rena knew the truth she had discovered on that old upright piano in her small hometown, that the most powerful music comes from the heart. And the most meaningful journey is the one that touches others along the way. And so, Rina Takahashi, the 17-year-old pianist from Japan, continued to play, to dream, and to inspire, leaving a legacy not measured by medals or fame, but by every life her music quietly changed, one note at a time. Her story had begun with a simple melody in a quiet room, but it had grown into a symphony of courage, perseverance, and hope, proof that dreams, no matter how small they begin, can reach the world.